Welcome to Sakshi TV Special Immigration Talk Show with lawyer Srinivas Kaveti. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 5 immigration shows every week: on Mondays with Somi Reddy, on Tuesdays with Mr. Kaveti, on Wednesdays with Prashanti Reddy in English, on Thursdays with Chand Parvatnini, and on Fridays with Banu Nindra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for use of any legal information. If you need any contact information, you can definitely contact the attorney directly. Kaveti Garu needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, you can definitely log on to their firm, which is www.kavetilawfirm.com site. They provide with a wealth of free information and online tools in hands of immigrant communities. So if you have any doubts, don't forget to ping Mr. Kaveti Garu on his number. So without any further delay, let us welcome Kaveti Garu on our show. Kaveti Garu, welcome back. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Shivani. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure to have you again on our show. So Kaveti Garu, now that post COVID-19, there has been a lot of changes. I think basically the world has turned at 360 degrees, where we have new rules and regulations, new norms, new travel litigations, a lot of other stuff. So with that came light into the online marriage. I don't know if people know it or not, but like we had a call earlier, Kaveti Garu, online marriages in fact are getting very famous. So let's dive into this topic. And firstly, let us understand what exactly is an online marriage.
Well, you must understand the marriage is actually a state subject, and it's also a customary subject. Every state and every county or every state, every country has its own law. But under the International Convention, there's a Hague Convention which says, what are the requirements for a marriage and how it has to be performed, and what is the recognition of marriages. That is under the Hague Conventions. The international community has recognized under the International Covenants of Political Rights and Civil Rights. So, they try to uniform all over the world, but there are some basic requirements for a marriage, a valid marriage. See, one has to understand when people say we're getting married, the first question comes into everybody's mind: what is the age? What is the age requirement to get valid marriage? And what is a valid marriage? What is a void marriage? Void means not valid. And the state governments and the federal government, central governments made its own laws. It is also based on the customs and traditions. If you see, let's see, if you take the example in America, to get married, you have to be over the age of 18. And there's some countries they can also allow you to get married by the age of 16. And can we marry below the age of 16? The answer is no. It requires judge's permission. So every state has its own requirement. I mean, when you see in India as well, there is a restraint of child marriages. It used to be so prevalent in India. Children used to get married because the parents used to get married to the children. So it's a restraint now. It's unlawful. You cannot marry your child in it. So things have changed. And if you see some Islamic countries, there are some requirements are different. And some countries, they recognize only having monogamous marriage, means only one wife. There are some countries which recognize polygamous marriages, means more than one wife. And, some, different between the Christian law, Hebrew law, Muslim law, Hindu law, and English common law. So, it's a very complex topic. It's not easy to cover in our 15-20 minutes of, this, interview. But the marriages are, so many types. So the legal requirements are 18 years of age. If you're below 18, then some states wants the parents to give a consent. And you cannot be in the jail. You cannot be serving a sentence of life. You cannot be a mental, illness. Some countries, they say that if you have even sexually transmitted diseases, you will be disqualified from marrying. So every country has its own requirement. But the general topic is you have to be in a sound mind and you have to be more than 18. And some states even make that if you're impotent, the marriage is invalid. Some states, some countries, they say if you're serving jail sentence, I mean, for life. Some states say that you can also marry in the jails. Sometimes we see the news that they got married in a jail and have children. So it's a generally, in US, because 50 states have 50 laws, so every state has its own law. But overall, because immigration as also as the federal law, the recognition of state law, if, for example, as you rightly asked, online marriages after COVID, is it recognized? That's another question. And we see that traditional marriages that you have to be in person. They should be a marriage celebrant. There should be a priest or a Maulvi in Islamic setting. It has to be personal. You have to go together, exchange vows, exchange promises. And in country like India, you have to have a Mangal Sutra, Saptapadi. And if in Islamic tradition there should be a Maulvi, in Christianity you have to exchange rings. And all these things are gone now. And post-COVID, there's some states are recognizing, and some countries are also recognizing online marriages. It's a latest thing now. Yes, it is valid in some states in America, like Utah recognizes online marriages, Arizona, California, Florida, Illinois, and Texas. They do recognize online marriages.
Yes. Now, Mr. Kaveti, can we talk about how legally they are? Are they legal in every other country? But let's specifically go with USA and let's talk about what exact states are they legalized and what are some terms and conditions that online marriages have.
Well, as I said to you, if you see, there are articles in Utah. People, there was a case that the husband was in UK and the wife was in Philippines, and they wanted to get married without meeting. So, they got married in Utah online. So they have to hire a celebrant and people in two different countries, but they're getting married in Utah. Well, that's valid. And they said the marriage is valid. But the question is again, will the immigration recognizes this? Because the person who's sitting in UK, he wants to bring his Filipino wife to UK. Would the immigration law recognize such marriages? Some countries they say yes, we do recognize. Some countries they say we don't. But overall, they want marriage to be consummated. What is the meaning of that? Consummation of marriage means they have to have the first night. They have to have sex. That's what it is. Consummation means. So the law says that even though they got married in from two different countries, the law says they have to be consummated. The marriage has to be consummated. Then the immigration law recognizes, and the husband or wife can petition their wives or husbands under the immigration law. Because immigration law is a federal law. If you want to sponsor your spouse. So if the state law recognizes it, the federal law do recognizes it.
Yes. Let's talk about the U.S. immigration, Mr. Kaveti. U.S. immigrations has a lot of terms and conditions, and especially when it comes to immigrants, there are again more. That's what their job is. So can you tell us in detail about is U.S. immigration considering online marriages legal, or is it again divided into states? If yes or no, please explain in details.
Okay. If, for example, as I mentioned to you, the Texas, California, Florida, if they're recognizing, because it's a state subject, if those states recognize the marriage, it is called recognition of marriage. As I said to you earlier in Hague Convention, one are called essentials of marriage, and second is called recognition of marriage. When the states recognize it as a valid marriage, the immigration do recognize it as a valid marriage. However, the question is, they want to see, immigration would go extra mile and see whether is it a valid marriage, is it not a sham marriage? What does it mean? Is it a marriage of convenience, or is it a real bona fide marriage? And there are tests again. And they want to see whether the persons are met before they're petitioning. Because if you see K visa or a green card application, they want that persons should meet personally. Let's say if an immigrant, if a citizen wants to sponsor his fiancée, or if a citizen wants to sponsor his wife, then the immigration wants them to meet personally, not one time, a few times. That is a requirement. If you're not, for example, many times our firm gets calls from Middle East, United Arab Emirates, or even Pakistanis or Bangladesh. This is a Muslim country, and they don't go. They make a phone call from here. They say that we want to marry a woman in Pakistan or a Bangladesh or some countries. In Islamic countries, you can't even see a wife before marriage. There's a parda. That means there's a you cannot see a woman. You can see a woman in a mirror to get married. There's some strict countries, Islamic countries. You cannot even talk to her, meet her personally. There's a middleman. There is a Maulvi. Islamic marriages. They said that, yeah, because they don't want to go into even Pakistan or a Bangladesh or Islamic countries. They want to marry. If it's an Islamic a person who's a US citizen, they want to marry from here on the phone. Yes, Islamic law allows them to get married because there's a Maulvi priest sitting next to the woman, and the priest is asking, "Do you want to marry this man?" By seeing it in YouTube or on an online or a photograph. The wife is saying yes, and husband is saying yes, and the marriage is valid because the Maulvi gives a certificate. It's a valid marriage. So when the country recognizes that as a valid marriage, if it is in Pakistan or Bangladesh or many Islamic countries, even in Africa, even some of the South Asian countries, the immigration comes in and says, yes, we do recognize that as a valid marriage, but is it bona fide? Did the parties meet? And is there any commingling of funds? Did the husband send any money? And what is their arrangement? And they look at more than this sometimes. Immigration to approve a green card. So they look at so many factors before they approve a green card. So one has to satisfy not just with this valid marriage certificate, but there are other things. As I said to you, commingling of funds, and is it a bona fide relationship? How many times you met a wife? I mean, did you go out anywhere? Did you go to another country for a honeymoon? Is the marriage consummated? Or do you have children with that spouse? They want to see whether the parties have been married before. Are there any divorces for both the parties? And they want to see the serious relationship. It's not just to accommodate somebody to come or bring them over to United States. So they want to see the bona fides of it. So those are the things. They should get
Yeah.
in touch with immigration lawyers. And then most of the times what happens from people overseas, they contact local lawyers. Those who are not familiar with immigration law. They should get in touch with the competent immigration lawyers from the place of domicile where the husband is living, and get the paperwork processed through the immigration attorneys. And the immigration also asks photographs. That's a key. Marriage ceremony and witnesses is another thing. You have to have witness who's witnessing the wedding, and they want sometimes affidavits saying that the marriage is bona fide. It could be from the husband's side. It could be from the wife's side. It could be from a third party or a friends or family. Somebody, an affidavit from the Maulvi, affidavit from the priest, or affidavit from the pastor, affidavit from the caste elders, from the parents. So there are so many requirements when they're processing these applications.
Yes. Yes. Mr. Kaveti, let's discuss a little on the Hague Marriage Convention. So can you explain us in detail what is this and how is it considered under the international law?
See, one must understand because we are living in a world where the rule of law is there. So because there are Islamic laws, there are Christian laws, Hebrew laws, Hindu laws, in different countries, and there are local. For example, if you see Africa, Africa has so many countries, 25 to 30 countries. They have customary marriages. Let's say there are some countries which are ruled by Muslims, and there are some countries ruled by Englishmen, even French. If you see Africa, they can also get married under the African law, which is customary law. They also get married 4 times. And if they get married under the English law, common law, let's say if you take the example of Ghana, they have English law and they have a customary law. The customary law, they can marry 4 times. And if you get married under the English law, they can only get married only once. See the distinctions? I mean, in Ghana, there are Christians and Muslims also. And again, if you go under the Muslim law, you can marry 3 times. So, because to have some sort of a uniformity or some sort of a recognition, the Hague Convention has come, and they said, there are certain, types of marriages, the essentials of marriage, and the recognition of marriage. If the marriage is recognized in Africa, let's say in Ghana, the marriage is recognized in America. That's called law of comity. The Constitution of US says, okay, we recognize a foreign marriage. If, let's say, the marriage is performed online by Utah, and the New York law recognizes, that's called full faith and credit. So these are all legal jargons where there's a recognition of marriages. And the law says, let's say if in Islamic context, in United Arab Emirates, the Arab sheikhs have three wives, and they all have children. The marriage is recognized, but will the immigration give a green card for all the 3 wives? The answer is no, because the American law, the immigration law, does not recognize polygamy marriages. Even second marriage is also not valid. It's called bigamy. So the immigration law says only we'll give you a green card for 1 wife and husband and children also. And sometimes if you're practicing polygamy, the immigration might disqualify you from giving you a green card because they don't recognize polygamy. So one has to understand what is monogamy, what is polygamy, having more wives, and what is bigamy, 2 wives. So it's a very complex area, and country to country differs, and country to country immigration law differs. And as per the immigration, it does not recognize. So only it has to be monogamous marriages.
Yes. So what exactly is a proxy marriage then, Mr. Kaveti? Can we get a little more information on that?
Okay, proxy marriages these days, you can have somebody on your behalf and go and get married.
Is that actually true?
Yes, it's there.
Is it actually happening?
Yes, it happened. Yes, it's valid. Proxy marriages are some countries are valid and some countries they don't. And in terms of Montana is a state in America, they do recognize proxy marriages, Montana. And in Canada, it's not recognized. That means if you can send somebody on your behalf, and the wife can send somebody on her behalf, and they both can get married and say, okay, it's marriage. Marriage is recognized under the Montana law. And Canada says no. So yes, proxy marriages are recognized.
So is it only considered online or is it physical also? I mean, just to benefit of doubt.
Right, because, again, it's a complex area because Utah is saying you can have. It's a good question. Again, we need to do some research. Whether the proxy marriages by online, is it marriage recognized? No. Answer is, the reason is proxy means you're sending somebody on your behalf. You're not going there. So proxy marriages will not definitely be recognized in onlines. In online, you have to be there physically. And proxy marriages, you cannot go to some places because sometimes military, because if the military officers are in war and they fall in love with somebody, and they're talking and they're dating online, so they want to get married. So they will send somebody, and proxy marriage is valid in Montana.
Yeah, that's very new, but again, I think we can get past it. So let's understand what exactly is a void. As much as I think I understood, it's an invalid marriage. So maybe can you give a little more information on this specifically?
Well, marriage is, let's say, if 2 individuals, adults, get married, it's amazing how things happen when they, because the law has an influence of Bible. Okay. In the Bible, it said that the marriage is between a man and a woman. That is the definition in Bible for the marriage. and they've not changed it in Bible. The same thing came into the law. So initially, when the laws are all framed, they said marriage is between a woman and a man. It never said the marriage is between men and men or woman and woman. Because of this transgenders, LGBT, now it is a Pride Month. As you know, that men and men can marry now, women and women can marry now. Even the transgenders can also marry now. That's a valid marriage too. I mean, the law went much ahead because it started by the Supreme Court of America, and it's like a fire. When the America gets a cold, the world sneezes. And because the United States Supreme Court recognized the same-sex marriages, it went and recognized in Europe. And even now, Indian Supreme Court says yes, it's not valid in some of the Islamic countries, but most of the common law countries and civil law countries, marriages between two individuals, it could be between two men, it could be between two women, it could be between two transgenders, and it could be between woman and man. It's valid. The only invalid marriage is if one of the party is mentally insane, or if one of the party is in a jail for lifelong, and if one of the party is maybe incompetent. Sometimes you're below age of 18, and sometimes you're mentally sick, and sometimes you're going through incarceration, you're in a jail. And some factors are there. In some countries, if you have a sexually transmitted disease, you cannot marry. So if somebody gets married, in America, even people, two AIDS patients, like HIV AIDS patients, they do get married. It's a big movement in America. And even the other day I saw a feature in India. I think there's one lawyer or somebody sees promoting marriages between two HIV patients in Delhi and Bombay. So that's valid. That's valid. Before it was invalid, but now it's valid. So
It
the
is.
way the society is changing is so different now. It's not like from what we used to know, the old dogmas of marriage, you see.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
in America, they used to be invalid. The marriage between a black and white was invalid in the past in America. They said, no, you cannot discriminate. They can interracial marriages, interreligious marriages, inter-caste marriages. Everything is valid in the world now.
Of course, of course. Um, Mr. Kaveti, let's get a little light on the polygamous marriage. Can you explain what exactly is that and get your inputs on it?
Well, polygamous, for one has to understand if anybody is marrying more than 2 to 3 times, that's called polygamy. Polygamy came from Latin. Poly means many. You're marrying many times simultaneously. You have a wife and you're marrying. I mean, it's okay 3 to 4 times in Islamic law, but in American common law, it's invalid. You could go to jail also. I mean, bigamy, marrying more than twice, you can go to jail as well. Sometimes I have a client now. This woman came on an H1. She married 3 times, and we are filing complaints on her. She's an H1 girl from Bangalore. I can't tell you the name, but she married third time to my client without getting divorced. So we are filing criminal complaints. So that's called polygamy. You cannot do that, and it's against the law in America. And it's called, even if you marry without getting divorced 2 to 3 times, that's called void marriage. Means the marriage is invalid. Even if you do a Hindu marriage or a Christian marriage without the knowledge, it's an invalid marriage. And void marriages means it's not valid from the beginning. And sometimes there are voidable marriages. Sometimes the age, they don't disclose the age. You could be 16, but you're looking like an 18 or 21, and you don't disclose your age, or you lied about your age. And sometimes you're a widow, and sometimes you're not a widow. You say that you're a widow, and you get married, and later on the other party comes to know that you're not a widow. And sometimes they say, "Oh, I've been divorced," but you're not divorced, and the other party comes to know. So all these things are, voidable marriages and in void marriages. These are not valid.
Yes. Let's understand what bigamy marriage is. I don't know if I've heard it, but can you shed some more light on what exactly this is?
Bigamy is an offense even under the US law, New York penal law, and as well as the immigration law, and as well as Indian law as well. Because The Bible said you can only have one wife, and because it's a in a monogamous society that came in the law. So when English came to India, they introduced that law in IPC. If somebody marries twice, they say it's a bigamy. Bigamy means more than one wife. If you marry, you go to jail. So I mean, sometimes life and sometimes 7 years. So that means the second marriage will be a void marriage, invalid marriage, and you will go to jail as well. So that's called bigamy.
So is this bigamy even legal? Is it even legal in India? Because I do see a lot of people, marrying twice and having two wives. I mean, I could be wrong, but there are actually couples out there who are having that. So is that actually legal?
It is illegal, but if the first wife complains, then it is illegal. But sometimes people in the world, they can't have children with the first wife, and the first wife consents to it. They said, okay, you can marry another woman to have children. So that's valid. But when the first wife doesn't give a consent, and if she doesn't know, if she goes and files a complaint, then that's invalid, and then it's punishable. So it depends upon facts to facts. And if you see, even in Hinduism, good old days before the English law came, even Hindu rajas had 2 to 3 wives. Hindu rulers also had 2 to 3 wives. And the Muslims have 2 to 3 wives even till today. But Christians never had that privilege in India. But if you see again in America, there are some societies in Christians, and there are some races in America. They also have, 2 to 3 wives.
Yes, yes.
It's
And
not
finally,
recognized, but I do.
yes, yes. And finally, Mr. Kaveti, does USCIS consider a marriage between two transgenders illegal?
No, it's legal. These days, they're even getting green cards. The immigration do recognize transgender marriages, same-sex marriages, and all of that. They're giving green cards also, but it has to
Yes.
be bona fide. You know, you have to prove, the burden of proof is on you to prove that it's a bona fide marriage, not to circumvent the immigration laws, not to get a green card, but you have to prove your bona fides of marriage. I mean, there are a lot of questions they'll ask you. They even could investigate. It's not that easy.
And I think with that, Kaveti Garu, we have to end today's show. But I think we did cover a lot of interesting topics. Thank you again, Kaveti Garu, for tuning in and giving us your time. Thank you so much for the viewers for tuning in. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.